The house settlement is the end of college athletics as we've known it. But is it the end for Baylor athletics?
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stuart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Joining me today, Acts of the Athletes CEO, founder, all that stuff, and Baylor alum, Branden MacKinnon, joining alongside, because we have to talk more about this house settlement. It's probably the biggest story ever to happen to college sports, or at least the biggest change that we have ever seen. And we are still breaking down kind of the nuts and bolts about it. So Branden is working on this inside and out from his agency and having to keep tabs on all of this from the player side of things, from the universities and athletic department side of things. So that's what we're going to go over today. What this means for Baylor, what this means for the athletes involved. Is this the end of NIL? Are we looking at cutting some sports? And what are we going to see over the future? It feels like this might just be the first domino to fall. So Branden, my first question to you, we have to, this is how we have to start the show. We had a raw reaction on the show yesterday. What does revenue sharing mean for Baylor, and I guess for a lot of schools in the Big 12 that fit that profile? Successful athletic departments, but not giant schools, don't have huge donors. What does it mean for schools like that?
Yeah, dude, good to be back. You left janitor out of my job title as well. Small army, so we wear a bunch of hats. Dude, I actually think it's good for most schools that have multiple sports that are generating revenue, right? So like you're talking a legitimate football program, a legitimate basketball program, and a legitimate third sport. Baylor's case, women's basketball. You look at like a lot of SEC schools, that's baseball or softball, whatever. So for Baylor and schools of that profile, I think it's a really good thing because you're essentially getting a lifeblood of capital that no longer has to be through the same donor conversations, like especially in Baylor's situation. And I don't know all the donors. I don't know really many or any of the donors.
Right. But from what we've seen from the outside, yeah.
Right. From what you've seen from the outside, like the concept of donor fatigue is a very real thing. Because the only return on that investment is a championship, which Baylor hasn't won in the NIL era. And so at least in any major, revenue generating sports. So, I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's really good for Baylor from hey, we know this is our cap. This is what we can offer for this reason. This is how we're allocating the $20.5 million. I think it provides some structure and clarity. Most importantly to the athletes, and secondarily, I think to the fans. But I mean, I have a lot of trust and confidence in the people that are in positions of decision at Baylor from an athletic department standpoint. I think that they had multiple different, door number one, if it gets approved, door number two, if it doesn't, door number three, if it kind of does, they were ready for this outcome. So I think it's ultimately really good for Baylor. And I do think it helps from a, funding talented rosters year over year without having to go to the same donors.
Yeah. And again, from what we're seeing on the outside, we don't even need to be in those meetings to know that within the last 10, 15 years, we've had a new football stadium, we've had a new basketball arena, we've had a new football facility, all these kind of upgrades and going alongside with the NIL for a school like Baylor and TCU and some of these other schools in the conference that aren't Texas Tech's oil money. That's a lot to keep going back to this donors time and time again saying, well, now we need this and now we need this and this. And that's not even touching the other things that are happening on campus either. So that definitely feels like there's some sort of fatigue there, and that could provide some respite for that. And looking at, so you say this is a good thing for Baylor in schools like it, that at least, athletic departments with a good head on their shoulders is the way I like to put it. Baylor certainly is that. So we're not getting into the realm of having to cut Olympic sports, are we? Or smaller non-revenue sports? Is that something, or is that something that all schools are going to have to weigh?
I think all schools are going to have to weigh it. Because I think again, purely my opinion, I'm just a guy on a podcast. But my opinion is that every school is going to have to weigh that outcome, because even paying athletes that are in non-revenue generating sports, like that's going to be an ask and an expectation for those athletes. Like I represent some fantastic athletes that are tremendous creators, and we represent them to help them in their social media content, kind of like true NIL deal world. They're asking me, and I think it's a fair question, to go to their athletic department and be like, hey, in this revenue share world, we're seeing like 80%, 70% to football, 15% to basketball. And then there's another 15%. How is that being dispersed? Is a track and field athlete, is a soccer athlete, who's going to slice that pie? And I think schools are going to have to evaluate. It's like, do we tell those athletes, hey, we're actually going zero here? Or some athletes, if you're at like the top tier, you get paid. And if you're kind of an alternate in a competition, you don't. I think each school is going to need to evaluate and kind of look at what makes sense, because the reality is, if that $20.5 million is a hard cap for Power 4 schools, anything in that $20.5 million that is not going to football, basketball, or your third potential revenue generating sport, is you are investing that capital in a sport that is a losing asset on your financial statement as an athletic department. I think that's difficult. And then on the field or on the court or in sport, anything that you don't invest to those major sports, is it, oh shoot, well, we know, Baylor said they were allocating 15% to sports that aren't football, basketball, or aren't football or basketball. What if we put that 15% in? Could we have had another competitive edge and added an asset? Like, those are the conversations that are going to be had. So I think every school has to evaluate the sport roster from top to bottom, from, highest profile, like a starting quarterback, or down to the, your alternates in some of those Olympic sport events.
Yeah. It's interesting because, you said it in there. It's like that has to be a discussion for some of these schools. And I'm not saying Baylor's one or even the profile of Baylor's one, but,
yeah.
You look at a school like Baylor, private, still small, okay with their money, not broke. But they've got a good football program. They compete at a high level in a big conference. And you got to wonder if some of these athletic departments are thinking, you know what? If we put all our eggs into football, like that's how we can generate more revenue for everything else. And maybe we're not the track and field school we used to be, or whatever, the soccer school we used to be.
Yeah.
And we can really put our eggs into that basket. So that is fascinating. And that's kind
more
of
interest. Sorry, on that thread, the more interesting profile to me is a school like where I feel like this could be like revenue share could really have schools thinking like, do we opt in? Do we not? Are schools where they have one revenue generating sport, like schools like a Grand Canyon, where it's like, yo, I know we're great at volleyball as well. Like, I know that's like they're really good at court sports and they have like decent athletic department, but like we are a basketball school, or like a VCU, for example, and they're not going to get the full $20.5 million because it's the 22% of what you generate in revenue. So like, let's say their total cap is $5 million. Like for easy math, let's say VCU has a $5 million rev share deal. If all they're doing is putting that to basketball, theoretically, VCU could now have a larger salary cap for their men's basketball team than a school like Baylor could, because of the revenue split, which I think that could become really interesting.
By the way, do you think that translates to schools with that kind of profile that are a lot bigger? Because I look at like Nebraska, for example, and they're not a hot athletic department by any means.
Yeah.
They make a lot of money off football, even when they're not good. Basketball, it exists. It's in the Big Ten, so it makes some money. But or even TCU, which is usually not a good men's basketball program. They're on the rise in women's. Baseball is typically pretty good, but you know how good they have to be to really generate revenue. Like, do even those schools have to think about that?
I think so. I think like there's not like a good overarching answer of like, yo, this is what should probably happen, because I think each school needs to evaluate their athletic department differently. I just think it's going to be fascinating. Or if you go look at like true mid-major schools, like in the Big West, let's say, right? So like UCSD was in the Big West. They just had this Cinderella run through into March Madness. Coach Olin got the job at New Mexico. The Big West is a very, very good mid-major basketball program. Because they're in the West Coast, they also are tremendous at like beach volleyball and stuff like that. Yeah. And so it's like, all right, well, if our rev share agreement is, again, let's use $5 million. I don't know the numbers, right? But like, let's use $5 million to like stay with easy math of the VCU example. And yeah, most of this is going to go to basketball, but now we're going to actually go to an unorthodox sport like beach volleyball, right? And like each school is just going to evaluate what their school is known for and what they're not. And I think it's even interesting of like a Boston University, like to go back to our home state. It's like, is Boston University going to opt into rev share and pay their guys something, but are we now just dumping that into ice hockey because we're in the Frozen Four every year and like that's where we're nasty, and are we now bringing in incredible hockey talent? I don't know. Like each school just has to like really self-diagnose what sports move the needle for us, and then how do we further reinvest there to move the needle. I think what's helpful on the agency side, and then I'll get off this tangent, is we now, as an agent, we now know and have clarity of like, oh, this is the salary cap, which every professional sports agent has. We now know where we can and can't go and what wiggle room we do and don't have when we're in the transfer portal or helping our kids, or not kids, young adults and student athletes and their families think through their process. We now have some clarity there, but we also can think ahead and get creative on, okay, well, we know that this is all that we have left from a salary cap standpoint. How can we help supplement this through what I would call like the true NIL out of sport partnerships?
And that is where I want to go. I want to see what we kind of looked at what it looks like for the fans, the universities. I want to see how it looks for the athletes, the student athletes that you're working with day in and day out, and what this decision means for your favorite Baylor Bears. Let's talk about that next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We are down to 2 teams in the NBA, the finals, every night delivering highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or that breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action than right now. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and as it's going on. Player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have never had more ways to play smart and to win big. And look, you're into this, right? Like if you got a read on who's heating up, why not put your money where your mouth is? Back it up. A little same game parlay action. Think $200 in bonus bets could add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? I think so. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place that first $5 bet, and if it wins, you guessed it, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Let me say that one more time. You head to FanDuel.com, place that first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Running it back on Locked On Baylor, Cam Stuart alongside Branden MacKinnon, Acts of the Athlete Sports Agency. He's in the weeds of all this stuff of NIL, transfer portal, and now the new house settlement, which we're still trying to make sense of. So, Branden, I want to
everyone is, not just us.
Yes,
everyone is.
We're all trying to make some sense of this. But Branden, I want to look at kind of what your dealings are day in and day out, and that's working with the student athletes. And the first thing that really kind of raised the antennas for me reading through all these reports over the weekend was we thought initially, and I say we as in the general public, thinking when this house settlement passes, we're going to have pay for play employees and employers. And all the language surrounding these reports have been, well, not exactly that. They're not exactly employees. They're more like contract workers. So what does that actually mean? And these are my words, not Branden's, but like, is this whole settlement kind of screwing over the athletes a little bit by phrasing it like that, by organizing it like that?
It doesn't make it easy on the athletes, which is a cop-out answer. But that being said, like most athletes that have, and this is not like a representation plug, like athletes do your thing. We work with athletes who want to work with us, but most athletes that do have good representation or a good circle around them, or parents that are like in the know, friends that are in the know, or even athletic departments that are like, yo, you need to do this. Know that even through collective deals, they've been operating as 1099 independent contractors for these collectives, but now that's with the school instead. And so what that means is like they do need to pay the standard 1099 income tax. They do need to prepare to set that aside. They do need to like be ready and keep track of any additional deals and file that on their own. The employer thing, I think you just open up a whole can of worms that the NCAA just didn't want to deal with, I think, at this point, which is like, okay, if we go ahead and make these student athletes employees of the school, we're not having to withhold. We now have to withhold taxes. We have to offer all of those benefits, whether it be, life insurance, accidental, disability, all that stuff. Which when you're employing athletes to do that becomes really difficult, right? Because it's like, what if, again, I'm not an insurance agent, but what if in the Seth Russell example, he's hurt on the job, right? Career ending injury. this, and he had a disability policy. Is that something that, potentially is now on the hook at Baylor? So I think that's a
for
big
years
reason why.
to come.
Yeah. So I think that's a big reason why they avoided the employer thing. I think that most people, and I feel this way too, believe that that's where we will eventually go. Candidly, like, I think this is going to get countersued for a number of reasons, and then we're going to be kind of back to square one. But I think that the result of potential down the line lawsuits and additional court cases is that student athletes are employees, is that they do have benefits, is that there's a collective bargaining agreement, and essentially it's a pro style model, which does kind of obsolete the NCAA. But yeah, that's my long-term opinion in terms of the student athlete question. But I think overall, if student athletes had infrastructure around them and we're doing all of the proper self-reporting stuff for the last 4 years, then it doesn't change anything. It's just that they're now 1099s of the school versus 1099s of the collective.
Gotcha. Okay. So in the argument of a countersuit here, what is most likely to trigger that? What part of this house settlement are either the universities or the athletes or the agents saying like, this is not going to work? Like, we're taking you back to court here.
Yeah. So I think that the revenue share thing is generally okay. Like, I think people are kind of like taking it on the chin and being like, we'll adjust and whatever. The thing that I think makes no sense at all, and I think this is not a hot take. You type in revenue share on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, and everybody's complaining about the clearinghouse. And for those that are maybe not familiar, the clearinghouse, Deloitte was hired to establish a clearinghouse agency to basically review any NIL deal, like think true NIL deal outside of the revenue share agreement that student athletes enter into, and to review it and determine if it's legitimate and is also fair market value. So what this organization is looking to avoid is schools operating above the salary cap. So think of, to use like a local example, if the, president and CEO of George's, if his name is still George, is like, hey, I'm going to pay Sawyer Robertson and Tunde Yesufu $100,000 each for a single Instagram post. That would immediately get flagged because student athletes do need to submit for review any deal above $600 and for review on the clearinghouse. And the clearinghouse would likely say, hey, this is actually not fair market value because clearly this is just trying to operate above the salary cap.
Yeah.
To Cam's point in air quotes, fair market value is what an entity is willing to pay another entity for a good or a service. If it is worth it to the George's president CEO to pay Sawyer or Tunde $100,000 for an Instagram post, then that is the fair market value for Tunde and Sawyer to George's. And so I think that's what's going to get countersued. And I think it's going to get countersued pretty soon. And I don't know what that means. I don't think anyone does, but I just don't see there's any way that holds up.
That makes me feel smart because that was the thing I read and I was like, who determines that? Who's determining fair? We're just going to let this guy from Major League Baseball determine what's fair market value. And that is going to, if that does ever, happen, that's going to lead to all kinds of stuff. Oh, why is this fair market value at Notre Dame, but not at Indiana? And so we're going to get a lot of that.
I think that there will be creative ways to avoid it.
Right. Yeah. We see that at the pro sports level.
Yeah. If the threshold is $600, do you now see athletes sign $100, $599 deals?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like there's ways to go. I'm not advocating for that. I'm not saying that's what we're doing at my agency or what I think is going to happen. But I just think, as with anything, when a new ruling comes out, exactly when NIL became legal the first time, people are going to try and find loopholes to make sure that they can control where their buying power is and their spending power is.
And that goes again across sports. I'll do one quick soccer example. European soccer,
love it.
They have only a certain amount of money you can get from certain sponsors, whether it's the front of your shirt or on your stadium or whatever sponsors. They can only give so much money. And Manchester City is run by like an entire nation by Saudi Arabia, and so they can only get this much from this company, but this guy also owns this company. And so that company now gives, and so it gets all messed up and they get endless pockets because of it. And I'm sure we will see that at some major state schools at the college football level if it gets to this. I do want to ask
or even traditional. Sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt, but like,
no, you got it.
I think the examples that have always been given, and I'm not trying to like not see the forest of the trees because we're primarily a basketball agency, but the example that always gets given is the major state school and their football team. I just want to reiterate, like, it's not only where the cap is $20 million. It's with those schools like the VCU example that I gave, or what, like, fill in the blank school that is a mid-major, but all they have is one sport. There's probably 5 to 10 donors at that school that were really successful and did a great job that are going to try and help do that again. So it's not only going to be, hey, we're zooming in on Texas and Florida and, Texas Tech or whatever. It's like any school that has donors that want to help their school acquire, promote, and retain talent are not going to be in jeopardy, which is every school in the NCAA.
This is good stuff. When we come back, we're going to tap into this nightmare a little bit more because Branden deals with a lot of contracts, and that's going to become a big part of this world in a different way. Are these contracts binding? Can you see your players locked down at your favorite schools for a couple of years, or is it all just a sham? We'll talk about that next on Locked On Baylor. Okay, Branden. So one of the big questions.
Sham before the ad read got me. I like that.
Thank you. It's a sham wow kind of sham is what we're about to see here.
Sure.
But you deal obviously in the world of contracts quite a bit, being a rep here, and the whole contracts around college sports has been just muddy for a lot of, fans looking at it, like trying to find out, is this actually binding? We saw the football player at Wisconsin who had already signed an NIL deal, but wanted to transfer to Miami. And he's like, well, there's nothing holding me here. And they're like, well, you signed this NIL deal, but it doesn't hold me here. And so we still haven't gotten, it looked like, a fair answer of like what happens with contracts in this new revenue sharing world and the kind of absence of traditional NIL that we've seen over the last few years. So what do these rev share contracts look like? Do they have any kind of weight? Are they binding?
Dude, I haven't seen one yet. Candidly, because a lot of schools didn't want to cut them and send them over as executables. Sure. I've only seen MOUs of rev share agreements, which don't really mean anything, right? It's
right.
Just like
kind of like what we were dealing with before.
Right. Like an MOU, it basically says this is theoretically what the contract would look like if it passes, et cetera. And so I haven't seen a firm one yet. I mean, it got approved Friday night. Of course, when every AD in the country is at NACDA, the biggest AD conference, the judge is like, we'll pass this now. Like when no one is at their institution, just buffoonery. Similar as like her first ruling came the Monday of the Final Four when everyone was also not at their institution. I'm just like, this is nuts. Not trying to drag Claudia Wilkin, but the timing is not ideal. So yeah, I don't know what the contracts look like. I don't know if they're going to be binding. I assume that they will be. Like, I think that when you enter into an agreement with a school versus a collective, I mean, a lot of the collective contracts have buyouts or, like theoretically no contract is binding. You may just not be entitled to the payment. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. Good question.
Yeah, that seems to be all the reports of like, we just don't know yet. Like,
we'll hopefully have it. Well, because there's no CBA, you can't establish a standard contract across entity. And so,
thank God for the 1099s and the contract workers. We don't need a CBA. We don't need a players union.
Yeah. Well, no players union, no players association. There's organizations that are trying to establish stuff like that. Like athletes.org is actually doing a really good job putting together resources to kind of be ready to be that players association if we ever get there. But yeah, the contract thing is nuts. I mean, I think we'll start seeing we being like the representation or athletes or schools or whatever, schools are going to start pumping out those agreements this week because, again, like the judge gave us 20 days to put this together and stand up and make first payments July 1st. So it's like, just got to figure it out. I was talking to one of my guys and this is a total aside. I'm sorry. This is bad podcasting. But I was talking to one of my guys and I was like, so this is where we're at. I basically gave him the exact same answer. And he cracked me up. He was like, so you've just kind of been like thugging it out, just like figuring it out as you go. And I was like, that's what everyone is doing, bro. Like everyone's just like,
you and Mac Rhodes are doing the same thing.
Yeah. I was like, so is your coach and your AD. Like we're all just trying to like move in this, like none of us know what's going to happen. So it's a weird time, bro. It's really weird. And I feel bad for the players because I think the timing of the ruling, the restrictions of the ruling, and the desire of donors to still fund players puts them in a really interesting position that players are going to have to make really hard decisions, and hopefully it's with good people around them. So,
Yeah, and that becomes still paramount through everything. It's like if you're not getting good advice, it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice up that revenue sharing or how they're getting money or anything like that. So, I do want to ask, kind of to close things out here,
Sure.
because it's been pretty doom and gloom the last couple of days for a lot of college sports fans. Like all the things we've talked about, right? Are these contracts going to matter to anybody? Are we going to see kind of the old style handshake with some money involved? Are they going to cut a bunch of sports? Paul Feinbaum went on ESPN as soon as the news broke and basically said what a lot of analysts have said of this is ultimately for college sports, the rich are going to get richer, the poor are going to get poorer, and it's all going to change year by year. Like this is just the beginning of this. Do you agree with that sentiment, or is it more nuanced than that, that the rich are going to get richer, the poor are going to get poorer until they go away?
I think that's a bad take by Paul Feinbaum.
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah. I just don't see a world where it's like that doom and gloom all the time. Like that's what's gonna sell, that's what's gonna click. Like now I'm just sounding like whatever. But
yeah,
like those are gonna be the takes. Like those are gonna be the ones that get clipped. And I think that people that are actually like in it, like Paul Feinbaum's job is not to work in NIL. But
right.
People whose jobs it is, I think we are seeing that like there's way more good people. Like I'm not saying this like in a self-righteous way, but like I've worked with some really forward-thinking, awesome people at Baylor. Speaking specifically to Baylor, as we are on Locked On Baylor, like Haneen Rashwan, who's the director of NIL administration at Baylor, does a phenomenal job and thinks very forward-thinking and is coming up with solutions for the betterment of college athletes. I don't think that that it's as simple as like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Like I just don't see that being the case. Because as long as like if you take the poor get poorer example, right? Like let's go to like a tangible example there. Does like, to use a school that Baylor's played, like does College of Charleston just shut down their athletic program? Like we played them in a March Madness game a few years ago. No, like they're still a viable basketball, golf, like everything in a very vibrant city, right? Like it's not as simple as like, oh, the rich get rich, poor get poor, and then they shut down. Like that's just unrealistic because like I just think athletic departments also fund the educational institution that they play for. Like I don't think it's as simple as that. I don't have a good take on what I think it will look like, but I don't think it's as simple as like this is the end of everything. Like college sports suck now. Like that's just a bad take and it's played out. And I think most people are exhausted by it. Like I think the better approach is like, okay, here's the cards we're dealt. We know that it's probably going to get sued again and likely get put on pause. What can we do in the meantime to be prepared for that outcome? Or what can we do to execute on what's already been put in front of us to care for the student athletes in a way that's actually impactful? Done with my rant, but that's my thought. Like, I think that the Feinbaums of the world are stressing people out unnecessarily.
Huh. Who would have saw that coming? So Baylor's going to be okay.
We're good, bro. Just it's not changing much, honestly. It's really not. I think the clearinghouse thing is the biggest thing that's going to be annoying, but for fans, it's not going to really impact it. Like that's not a headache for you. It's not, you're not being hit to fund the salary cap. You know what I'm saying? Like it's
not our money.
Yeah, it's fine. Like let Baylor spend the NCAA's money. Like they should be they should have been doing that for a long time.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So
Baylor's going to be fine. Branden MacKinnon guaranteeing a national championship within the next 10 years in a major revenue sport. I heard him say it.
Dude, my buddy and I were going through, and you and I should do this for the Patriots at some point. I'd love to. My buddy and I just pulled up ESPN and the football schedule over FaceTime. There's a lot of wins on that schedule, man.
There's wins, man. Especially when you look past September. There's a lot of wins.
Yeah, like
we could have done a little Mike and the Mad Dog thing today. Yeah. We could have done like, all right, dog. October the 4th, Kansas State.
Yeah, we could have. Should have. Yeah, should have.
Oh man,
there's a lot in there. So maybe a natty this year in football. I'm happy to guarantee that. Who knows?
Didn't say anything, so make sure we get a clean cut of that. Anyway, Branden, we'll have to have you back on before football season, and we'll go through the schedule and everything.
Yeah, would love to.
Can't wait, man. Acts of the Athlete Sports Agency at AOA Sports Agency on Instagram. You can see all the cool work. that he's doing there. Everything under $600 for Instagram posts that he's getting paid for. All
we're
on
not
there.
getting paid. Yeah.
and repping Baylor athletes at this point.
Correct. We have one Baylor athlete. Yes.
Baylor athlete. We love that. Branden, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Always appreciate your insight and looking at this through the expert's eyes, Branden. Truly, you've been following this in and out for months and months. We've been kind of waiting to have you on the show for this to actually pass. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it was a blast, brother. Thanks so much. Sick 'em.
And we appreciate you guys following along every day as well. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, find us on YouTube, of course, and wherever you find your podcast. We're on the hot path towards 4,000 subscribers. We need your help in getting there. Appreciate you guys. Get your voices heard in the comment section. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. And we will see you tomorrow on Locked On Baylor.